In Chapter 2, we'll talk about foodborne illness, and specifically an outbreak, and what constitutes an outbreak. We'll also talk about the three major types of contaminants: biological, chemical, and physical. Foodborne illness outbreaks can be quite devastating. It may surprise you to know that it only takes two people to begin an outbreak. When two or more people have the same symptom from the same food, it is the person in charge responsibility to contact the local health department and report the incidents. An investigation usually follows along with laboratory confirmation. It's important to hold on to the food in question. You will want to remove it from your inventory to a separate area and flag it with signs stating "do not use" and "do not throw it away" or discard it. The common symptoms of foodborne illness include diarrhea, vomiting fever, and jaundice. We'll talk a little more about jaundice when we speak of biological contaminations. Jaundice is a yellowing of the skin and eyes. If food is not handled correctly, it can become unsafe. According to the CDC, these are the 5 most common food handling mistakes, or common risk factors, that can cause foodborne illness. The number one risk factor is when food handlers do not wash their hands properly or with enough frequency. Cross-contamination is another risk. A great example of cross-contamination is the mistake of putting raw chicken on a top shelf of a cooler and a peach pie on the shelf below. If the chicken was to drip onto that pie, the pie would become contaminated, and that is a prime example of cross-contamination. Cooking or holding foods at incorrect temperature can also cause contamination. Failing to cook chicken at 165 degrees or failing to hold cold food at 41 degrees or colder can cause contamination. Purchasing food from unsafe sources can be a big problem, so purchasing food from approved, reputable suppliers is critical. And finally, using unclean or contaminated equipment. Contaminated food is sometimes referred to as adulterated food. There are 3 major types of contamination: biological, chemical, and physical. We'll take a deeper dive into each of these 3 major types in the following slides. Biological is the most common. Biological contaminants are often referred to as pathogens, small, living, dangerous organisms. Let's take a closer look at these biological contaminants. We'll be discussing what each contaminant is and how to prevent them from occurring when we are preparing food. Bacteria grows best when Fat Tom conditions are right. Fat Tom is an acronym that we will get to in just a bit. Bacteria grows best in the conditions represented by each letter in Fat Tom. Viruses require a living host, meaning the virus needs to feed on a living creature in order to survive. Viruses are typically associated with humans and animals in general. We can prevent viruses by good personal hygiene, including washing our hands, and from buying shellfish from approved reputable suppliers. Viruses are transferred from humans to food via the fecal-oral route. We prevent this risk by washing hands properly after using the restroom. Viruses can be tricky. It's important to know that viruses can lie dormant. Viruses can be in a state of dormancy when frozen. Unfortunately, freezing a virus will not kill it. When the frozen food is thawed, the virus comes back to life as it was merely sleeping in the frozen or dormant state. Parasites also require a living host to survive. Parasites are more associated with seafood and wild game. We prevent parasites by buying from approved reputable suppliers. Fungi include yeasts, molds, and mushrooms. We prevent fungi again by buying from approved reputable suppliers. Toxins in food are related to mushrooms and seafood. Like parasite and fungi, we can prevent toxins by buying from approved reputable suppliers. It's important to note that ingesting a toxin, for example a toxic mushroom, can cause neurological symptoms such as hallucinations, chills, or tingling. Let's circle back and explore bacteria and the conditions represented by each letter of Fat Tom. The F in Fat Tom represents food. Bacteria grows in some foods. TCS food supports the growth of bacteria better than most other types of food. Acidity. Acidity is measured on the pH scale, which ranges from 0 to 14. A low pH is acidic. A high pH is the opposite, alkaline. Bacteria grows well with a pH of 4.6 to 7.5, which is neutral. The official temperature danger zone lies between 41 degrees Fahrenheit and 135 degrees Fahrenheit. Bacteria grows rapidly in this temperature range. Bacteria grow even more rapidly from 70 degrees Fahrenheit to 125 degrees Fahrenheit. We can't completely avoid these temperature ranges, but we do our best to make sure that food does not linger in either of these zones. We'll talk about different ways to avoid this temperature zone, especially when we're cooling hot food. Time limits are important when we think about bacterial growth. Later, we will discuss how long foods can be held with temperature control and without temperature control. Exposure to oxygen or air can create a condition ripe for bacteria. This is why many foods are sealed airtight. When the packaging is opened, the food is exposed to air or oxygen. The amount of moisture available in food is called water activity, or AW. The AW scale ranges from zero point 0 to 1.0. The higher the value, the more available moisture in the food. Bacteria grows well in foods with high levels of moisture. On the topic of biological contaminants, we'll discuss the Big Six, the six most common foodborne illnesses. You'll notice that 4 illnesses fall under bacteria and 2 fall under viruses. Salmonella typhi is associated often with typhoid fever. Non-typhoidal salmonella is the foodborne illness often seen on the news associated with contaminated chicken or produce. Shigella is associated with animal manure and flies, or we might say feces and flies. And lastly, under bacteria is E. coli, usually associated with ground beef. The remaining 2 illnesses of the Big Six foodborne illnesses are hepatitis A and norovirus, both falling under viruses and both highly contagious. A common symptom of hepatitis A is jaundice. Jaundice is a yellowing of the skin and yellowing of the eyes. Last of our Big Six most common foodborne illnesses, we have norovirus. Norovirus is typically spread through vomit and diarrhea. It's easy to see why good personal hygiene, like washing our hands, is imperative in preventing the spread of viruses. Food handlers who have contracted any of the Big Six foodborne illnesses are required to report the illness to the food manager and are excluded from work and not allowed in the facility. Further, if someone the food handler lives with is diagnosed with one of the Big Six illnesses, the food handler is excluded and is required to report this to the food manager as well. That food handler may not be showing symptoms, however, they could be what is called a carrier of the disease and therefore contagious. Once a food handler has reported a Big Six illness to the manager is then required to contact the local health department and inform them. The food handler is required to be symptom-free for 48 hours before returning to the workplace. Before returning to work, the food handler must acquire a doctor's permission and/or permission from the health department before returning to work. Over half of all foodborne illnesses are caused by norovirus. You may be more familiar with norovirus than you realize. Norovirus is sometimes called the cruise ship virus, as it tends to spread quite quickly in heavily populated spaces. There are two other foodborne illnesses worth mentioning here. Listeria is the foodborne illness commonly associated with deli meat, and botulism we associate with canned food. Before we conclude our discussion on biological contamination, food handlers should be aware of a common toxin associated with seafood. Ciguatera toxin associated with barracuda, amberjack, grouper, and snapper begins with toxic algae that is consumed by fish. When humans then consume that fish, they are at risk of exposure to Ciguatera toxin. Now that we have learned about bacteria, let's take a look at chemical contamination. Chemicals can contaminate food if they are used or stored the wrong way. Cleaners, sanitizers, polishes, machine lubricants, and pesticides can be risks. Also included are deodorizers, first aid products, and health and beauty products, such as hand lotions and hairsprays. Certain types of kitchenware and equipment can be risks for chemical contamination. These include items made from pewter, copper, zinc, and some types of painted pottery. This is especially true when acidic foods, such as tomato sauce or lemonade, are held in them. The term for this is leaching. This is a chemical contamination caused by the chemical reaction of the material to the acidic food. To prevent chemical contamination, the chemicals you use must be approved for use in a food service operation. They must also be necessary for the maintenance of the facility. All chemicals should be stored properly, that is, in a separate area away from food and food equipment, or under food and food equipment. All chemicals come with manufacturer's directions that should be followed by all food handlers and other staff. The last of the three major types of contamination are physical contaminants, or harmful objects in the food. A physical contaminant is something physical in the food that is not supposed to be there and could harm someone or make them sick. A few common examples are hair, metal shavings from cans, fingernails, bandages, and toothpicks. Naturally occurring objects can also be physical contaminants. For example, you expect wings to have bones. There are not supposed to be bones in boneless wings or chicken strips. So a bone in boneless wings or a chicken strip would be a physical contaminant. It is not supposed to be there, and it could harm someone. A cherry pit in a cherry pie is another good example. Although cherry pits and bones occur naturally, they are still considered physical contaminants, as they could cause harm. And there you have it. The three major types of contamination: biological, chemical, and physical, remembering that biological is by far the most common of the three major types. Just a few slides to go, and Chapter 2 will be complete. We've talked about cross-contamination earlier in our discussion. If you recall, our example of cross-contamination was the mistake made when raw chicken was placed above a ready-to-eat pie in the cooler. Let's talk about another cross that can be harmful: Cross-contact is associated with allergens coming in contact with or being transferred to other food. An allergic reaction is when the immune system mistakenly considers the allergen to be harmful and attacks the food protein. We call a severe reaction anaphylaxis or an anaphylactic reaction. Anaphylactic reactions can be deadly. Often in these instances, an EpiPen is immediately administered and 911 is called. Common symptoms of an allergic reaction are hives or itchy rashes, swelling, or difficulty breathing. Allergen training for food handlers and staff is an important defense against allergic reactions. A staff member, usually the person in charge, should be knowledgeable of each ingredient in all this dishes served. All allergen-related questions should be referred to the ingredient expert or the person in charge. For kitchen staff, cooking different types of food in the same fryer oil can cause cross-contact. In the photo, shrimp allergens could be transferred to the chicken being fried in the same oil. Letting food touch surfaces, equipment, or utensils that have touched allergens can cause cross-contact. For example, putting chocolate chip cookies on the same parchment paper that was used for peanut butter cookies can transfer some of the peanut allergen. It's important to wash, rinse, and sanitize cookware and equipment. Anytime we switch from one food to another, it becomes more vital to wash, rinse, and sanitize after working with one of the 9 food allergens. We've all heard the expression, "when in doubt, throw it out." This is a good direction and policy to follow whenever there is a question related to allergens. The corrective action in these cases would be to throw the food away, discard it, and make the dish again. While more than 160 food items can cause allergic reactions, just 9 account for 90% of all reactions in the United States. These 9 food items are known as the Big Nine: milk and dairy products, eggs, fish, crustacean shellfish, including shrimp, wheat, soy, including tofu, peanuts, tree nuts, and the most recent addition to the list of allergens is sesame.